The other day, while researching something completely different, I came across a curious fact. So one of the things I love about the Underground is how non-uniform it is. Sure, you have the corporate identity and so forth, but beyond that it's an extremely diverse system. No two lines or stations are quite alike. Running this crazy network that's been built up over a century and a half is a formidable task. And I discovered that TfL have a little trick. I'd always assumed that stations were dealt with purely on a case-by-case basis. Well, I mean, they have to be. You can't just take what works at Roding Valley and apply it at Victoria, say. But TfL has 4 categories into which they divide their stations. The categories are local, metro, destination, and gateway. These categories cover basically the kind of traffic the station will see and therefore how they need to be staffed. There's a sort of unofficial 5th category as well, but I'll get onto that later. Perhaps the best way to explain how this works is to explain what the categories mean. Local stations tend to be in the suburbs. They don't see a huge amount of use outside of rush hour. The passengers using them will most likely be people who live in the area, which will be heavily residential. They will probably be regular commuters, who will therefore probably not need help and will be paying for their travel using Oyster or contactless cards. Likely the station won't be very big. The specific examples TfL gives are Rickmansworth and Chiswick Park. Management will generally be shared between several local stations. The next type up, as it were, is the metro. The examples given are Clapham South and Southwark. Metro stations tend to be closer to the centre, in some cases actually in the centre. They are much busier. Generally, you can expect the majority of users to be regular commuters who probably won't need a lot of help, but you must also expect visitors who may need assistance. They will be busiest at rush hours, but they won't be totally quiet outside of those times. The stations, not the visitors. Management will generally be what's described as twinned, either with another metro station or with a station in one of the higher categories. Next, you have destinations. These are stations where you can expect a lot of visitors to the city, and things will probably be pretty busy throughout the day. You'll need someone on the platforms and a fully staffed control room. As you might expect, most of these are in central London, but not all. Wembley Park is a destination station, for instance. The final category is gateway stations. As the name implies, these are stations at which people arrive in London. The most obvious example is King's Cross St Pancras, where you might expect passengers from all over Britain and Europe. Many will not be familiar with the Underground. The stations will be busy pretty much all the time. They will be managed as a single unit, or at most will be paired with one metro station. So that is the 4 official types of station. These categories are far from arbitrary. They can determine an awful lot about a station. For instance, what facilities do you need? You'll need plenty of ticket machines at a gateway, but probably only 1 or 2 at a local. A gateway will need to be big, with lots of space for passenger movement, and you need to account for the fact that a lot of those passengers won't know where they're going. Staff will need to be able to deal with a lot of queries, and frankly, it will probably be a lot more stressful for them. A metro station will be busy, but the majority of users will likely know exactly where they're going and what they're doing. If a new station is opened or an old one is rebuilt, the design will have to take the likely usage into account. And these categories will be quite useful for that. TfL make a list of the station categories freely available online, and it contains a few surprises. For instance, you might expect Covent Garden to be a destination, located as it is in the heart of Theatreland and being a major shopping centre. But it's not. It's a metro. Elephant and Castle, meanwhile, is a destination. I would have assumed it would be a metro. Waterloo is a destination, not a gateway. I assume that's because while it's a very busy station, often the busiest, most of the main line station's traffic consists of commuters who haven't come any further than the southeast of England. And then there's Heathrow. Terminals 2 and 3 are a gateway, but Terminal 4 is metro. Terminal 5, meanwhile, falls into that unofficial fifth category. The fifth category is stations that appear on the list as not applicable. What this refers to is stations that are served by the Underground, but are not Underground stations. So, for instance, there is an Underground platform at Kensington Olympia, but the station is managed by London Overground. Terminal 5 is managed by Heathrow Express. Wimbledon is a national rail station that happens to have some underground platforms. The system is by no means one size fits all, as you may well have figured. The aforementioned Wembley Park is a destination, but when there's no event on, it's more like a metro. Whitechapel was a metro until the Elizabeth line opened, whereupon it became a destination. With the age of the network, some stations aren't suited to the category they find themselves in due to the area they serve changing. Camden Town is a destination, but it's laid out more like a metro. And the crowding issues at Covent Garden, which basically would have been a local when it opened had the categories existed, are well known. You might have experienced them yourself, in which case, I'm so sorry. It's all rather curious. No doubt someone who actually works in TfL management could explain more. This isn't the only means of categorising stations. Obviously there are fare zones and lines. Presumably a metro in Zone 1 has different requirements to one in Zone 3. And as I said at the beginning, I don't doubt that each individual station has a certain amount of tailoring. Still, I find it an interesting insight into how the network is run. Plus, it's a little bit more nerdy info, and who doesn't love that? Well, I hope you enjoyed this categorical tale from the tube. I'd be grateful if you'd leave a like and consider subscribing for more if you did. Is this categorization a thing you were aware of? I found it quite by accident. So a part of me worries that it's something that everyone knew and I just missed somehow. Anyway, I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon. As always, you are the ticket machines to my gateway. And I'll see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube.